everyone for coming out. Really appreciate it. You guys are looking great. Working out. Looking good. So, just to introduce myself, my name is Jim Jones, Ruby on Rails engineer. Work as a consultant in San Francisco area. I have 14 years of experience working with Rails on and off for the past 6 years. So I, like probably many of you, have a lot of side projects, to the point where most aren't completed, we've even forgotten about some. And there are times when I'm experimenting with certain images or trying to write some copy text, and I feel stuck. I stuck to a point where the colors start looking awkward, or my writing sounds strange, or it's 2 a.m. and I think I'm trying to be way too funny than I probably am. And I really can't tell what the issue is. And so I sought out to find usability solutions. And while there's many usability services out there, there aren't very many that allow me to evaluate certain bits of the site. Most of these are very formalized services, whereas I wanted a quick pointed feedback without the need of formalizing my requirements and such. And so I had some prior experience with Mechanical Turk with data gathering, and so I started to kind of go down this route with Mechanical Turk. And so for those who don't have a background in this, I'm going to give you a little rundown of the service. Mechanical Turk is a crowdsourcing marketplace, and it allows individuals to coordinate just small tasks to be performed by people. So imagine someone proposes the problem and says, you have an army of 1 million people that will each do a 10-second, 20-second task for you. What would you use that for? So these are the sorts of kind of micro-task type of problems that Mechanical Turk is really good at solving. These are generally tasks that computers are unable to do or don't do very well. And so when we think about Mechanical Turk, most people, their experience is with very straightforward tasks as far as the tagging of images, scientific surveys, which usually extend to demographic data, gathering analyses in that regards. And so most people have a very straightforward thinking of the service. So hopefully we'll kind of expand that and get you guys thinking a little bit differently towards the end of this. But just to make sure that we're on the same page, I'm going to do a little bit of terminology here. When I refer to a hit, that's a human intelligence task. So this is the task that you're posting to Mechanical Turk. This is the task that instructs the worker to do something on your behalf. The Turkers are the workers that are performing the task. Yes, they do call themselves Turkers. And an assignment is something within that particular hit. So one Turker will complete an assignment within the hit. So if you had I want to classify this image, and you want, say, 100 responses on that, and you're going to take the most common response as the classification for that image, you would have one hit and say 100 assignments for that. With the Mechanical Turk service, you have the estimates are as many as a couple million. You have lots of different motivations here, and there was a survey done. This would have been back in 2008, but a lot of people responding with tons of different motives here. Most is monetary compensation. Most are probably trying to supplement their income and such. But you have also people one guy at the top, it's kind of cut off here. He says he's battling insomnia, and some guy needs drug money apparently. And so it's not all monetary compensation. I mean, when you start to think about people pass the time playing Farmville or something like that, next time you get a little bored, you should actually explore the service, because there's just a multitude. There's just the types of hits that are out there just span so many different domains and such that it could be rather entertaining, and they would obviously be making money. So Some of the demographics for this is the United States dominates the service, and then closely following is India, and then you definitely have other countries, but majority is definitely the United States and India for completing these tasks. And as you can see, the gender breakdown is primarily female in the United States, whereas in India it's actually primarily male. With the ages of workers, we've got the 24 to 33-year-old range is the most dominant for both of the countries. So it's definitely younger generations that are utilizing the service and such and are aware that it exists. And here's probably the most surprising fact that people are taken back by is that the education level, majority of the users actually have a bachelor's degree. And when we start going over some of the feedback that I've received, I think you guys will be really impressed with the level of quality that's given. And it'll be quite apparent that these people are very educated and such. So it may not be a shock towards the end of the presentation. So. And then average income, at least for like the US, it tends to be primarily middle-class people supplementing their work, or supplementing their income. So we start kind of with the basics here as far as working with Mechanical Turk. There's 3 different ways that you can interface with the service. You have their very basic web interface, which is just this very simple form builder, allows you to put text fields, text areas, and that sort of thing. They also have an API for the Ruby community. We have RTurk, Mark Percival gem, Ruby AWS, and then you have MyGem, Turkey, which is built on top of RTurk, which provides some convenience methods for integrating within Rails. And there also is a command line tool, which is kind of API coupled with some XML files that drive interfacing with it. Most people's experience is probably with the basic web interface, which is just very basic form fields. And so I think that's where you get the perception of just very straightforward linear surveys and data collection. So that's kind of where that perception has stayed, because that's most people's first exposure to the service. So there's actually 2 different ways that a hit can be displayed. If you use their simple interface, that's going to be an HTML form that's generated, HTML page that's generated and just served up from S3. But there's also this concept of what we call an external hit. And this is something that most people don't take advantage of, but provides the most power here. With my gem, Turkey supports an external hit. And what this does is, the Turker is able to interact with your website directly. And then your website is actually displayed within an iframe. So, and I'll give an example of this here in a little bit, but given that means that you have full control over the form, what is displayed, and how it's input from the Turker. So, the Turkey gem does a couple of things. Allows the developer to easily integrate with Mechanical Turk and Rails using it's a very convenient Form 4 light helper, where you can see we've got the Turkey Form 4, just takes an instantiated object with the passing params, and it just takes your form field data. The big difference here is that instead of the data being posted back to your server, the data is actually posted back to Mechanical Turk. And then the second portion that Turkey allows, that helps with development, is it allows you to easily retrieve that data that's been posted to Mechanical Turk and import it right back into your models. And so the workflow generally is that a Turker completes your assignment, data gets posted to Mechanical Turk, you run a process, in this case there'll be a rake task, that retrieves the data, it's going to import it into your models, and you're going to programmatically approve or reject. And so this basically determines whether that Turker gets paid or not. And they can obviously contest whether it should have been rejected or not, but that's the general workflow. So, okay. So that thing, all things aside, I want to show you here a very basic app that I've written with Turkey. We're going to go on the limb here, do something in real time, and then break that rule, which is probably a terrible idea, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyways. So let's see if we can let me swing around here. This is really awkward. And then my neck and turn that far. Let's take a look here. So we're going to say, please say, that's it. Yes, all right. Here we go. Please say hello. All right. 1 second, let me type this. Oh no, hold on, fail. Oh my god. Just when things are going so good. I disconnected from the internet, I got paranoid. Alright, let's try it again. Here we go, big bucks, no way means fail. Oh my god, hold on. Let's try this one more time. Oh man. Oh well. So, what's up?
Number 6, you need a light.
Oh. Catch. Man, that's smart people. Oh my gosh. Might be. I bet you're right. Hey, wow. Oh my god. Wow. I hope this guy drinks. I want a beer. Oh, I probably should have stayed on this side. Let me go ahead and show here really quick what the Turker is going to see. So that you guys can get a feel for what an external head looks like. Because it's kind of hard to conceptualize and such. So they're going to encounter that says say hello. Here's the directions. This is just an iframe right here. This is wrapping the application. And this is the form that's been created using the Turkey form method that's going to be posted back to Mechanical Turk. So I control this entire form. I control this entire page. It's just a Rails app running on a Heroku instance. And so this is what they're going to interact with. So we'll come back and revisit it and see if anyone said hello. Hopefully, you don't say anything about my family or anything that'd be embarrassing. So we'll get back to that. So remind me, we'll jump back there, we'll see if anything came from inside. Okay, so now we have kind of the base cases set up, and we're going to go ahead and get into the more advanced cases, what this talk is actually about. So we're going to talk about soliciting feedback. My goal was, how could I gather meaningful feedback quickly, and I wanted to make better decisions within my development. And I wanted to do this extremely quickly. I wanted to skip deployment entirely. This is about trying to get feedback as early as possible with your particular project. It's like I was saying, there's times in the 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm writing something, I know it sounds awkward, and if this is a project that I'm the only person working on, I have no one else to bounce things off of. So I want to be able to gather feedback, but I don't necessarily want to, say, merge into master. If you are on a team, you may not want to merge it in. You may not want to deploy to a staging server because you may be deploying over another branch or something. So sometimes you just want to hit that local dev instance and really try out some early ideas and get feedback on it. So after some exploration, I came with the first tool choice would be the forward gem. And what this gem allows you to do is to easily expose your local dev instance to the outside world. And it gives you a nice, convenient domain that others can use to access your server. Now this one is a paid service. There is another one called Local Tunnel that is free. The reason I prefer forward over Local Tunnel is that Local Tunnel will actually give you an HTTPS interface and actually gives you the domain that they give you remains static versus Local Tunnel seem to change, which I would just forget that it changed. So I think forward was kind of superior in that. And so second, as you probably already guessed, we're going to use Mechanical Turk to solicit the feedback, so we're going to need a gem to interact with the service. Since I wrote Turkey, I know Turkey, we'll use Turkey. So, with the latest Turkey revision, I'm introducing this concept of what I call a study. And given this code, you can see that I called it this helper method called Turkey study. And what this does is it displays a nice form on your website that gives the Turker the instructions that you define when you're posting your task, and it gives them a nice text area where they can enter in feedback. So once you have this method inserted within your application template, you can go ahead and you can run the rate task, which is just rate Turkey create study. You're going to want to pass in the URL, which is the URL that forward has given you. So this is the important part, right? That forward is exposing that local dev instance. So imagine you're getting ready, you've just made this big kind of experimental branch, you're not sure if it's going to work, you want some feedback on it. Imagine you're going to lunch and you're going to be eating probably a big burger, like super duper burger or something, and it's going to be a long lunch, and you're like, I'd really like to get some feedback on this. So you open up your dev instance, the outside world, and we're going to be posting our hit to hit that particular dev instance. So this is where we get around the whole deployment. This is where we get to have the Turkers give us feedback on the experimental portion of our development. And then lastly, retrieving the feedback is just a simple rate task and this is for Turkey. So just to give you kind of a brief background, I've been working on this project in the evening. It's called 5Ask5, and basically it's a website that allows fans to bid on the spot to meet their favorite celebrity in a video chat. And so it's this auction platform, and I've been working on it for a while now, and this is one of those particular projects that I kind of reached some dead ends at the end of the night. And so here you can see, here's the home page. We've got this particular, get my mouse pointer over there. The directions overlay, that's part of the Turkey study form helper. So this is what's going to be overlaid on every page. And this is the one that allows the Turkers to enter in their feedback and submit. So since we're putting in the application helper, application template, that it's going to be displayed on every page. So given that page, here's some sample feedback that I got from the Turkers, so you can kind of get a sense for what the quality is. First one says, you should make the logo bolder than the menu. They blend in too much. The image could be lightened up because the saturation is too much for my eyes. The gray box over the image could contain more information or a better call to action. And the second one said, Ruh-roh, I had problems with your site with the sign-in. When I clicked in with Facebook, it gave me an error, page cannot be displayed. And other than that, the site is doing great, loads fast, and it's easy to understand. You should add more content, find more bands willing to do the online web chat. Great point, Turker. And so, as you can see though, This happens a lot too, that there's a lot of people with very technical backgrounds, for whatever reason, are playing around with the service. Obviously this guy knows about saturation. You obviously can see that my Photoshop skills suck. But he's willing, he points that particular, he points that out. And that actually became a common thread throughout the feedback that I never would have thought. I'm like, for some reason, I'm programming me, I love saturation, but there was a lot of people that are like, man, this is driving my eyes crazy. And I probably wouldn't have known that unless I solicited feedback. And so I actually will have to hire a designer. So, but it's good. The quality of the feedback, most of the time, you're kind of looking for these threads, these common threads that people are pointing out and such. And so, a few pro tips when you're soliciting feedback. It's always better that you make your task as a personal appeal. Don't come in there saying, yeah, I'm making this website for AT&T, big time client, I'm making a lot of money, if you could help me out, it'd be great. They're not going to appeal to that. You make it a personal appeal. You make it like, hey, this is something I'm doing on my own, I really would like it if people could help me out. And most of the time, they're very happy to oblige. In fact, I would say when you make it personal appeals, they actually sometimes overextend themselves. I've gotten 4 or 5 paragraph feedbacks before that were posted for like a quarter, and it's incredibly helpful. The research paper will call those people eager beavers. You'll actually see that in a lot of different Mechanical Turk research, so it's an interesting term, I thought. And you also want to ensure that you're inviting the Turkers to give you negative feedback. So the Turkers, they obviously get compensated when they complete a task, but there's a lot of them that are fearful that if they provide negative feedback, that you're going to go ahead and reject it. And so you actually kind of have to overcompensate for that, and you have to invite them and say like, hey, what don't you like about this site? Because otherwise, like, oh, super duper great, it's looking good, keep your head up, you know, and it's just like, it doesn't really give you anything. So you really have to make it a safe place for some negative feedback. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little more advanced case of A/B testing. So I'm going to use the Vanity Room. This is just an A/B testing framework. Has nice integration with Rails, relies on Redis and Active Record. Pretty easy to get set up. You can see my definition of my test here is I'm going to be experimenting with the homepage photos and which one I think is more effective in getting people to interact. And as you can see, within my events controller, what I'm considering a successful interaction is if they actually reach the events controller, the show page for the event. So one note here is that intent is really hard to test with Mechanical Turk. These are paid workers, they're not your customers, and they're not interested in your product. So it's a terrible way to say, is someone going to really buy this, at least from an interface perspective, right? You may be able to ask, would you buy this or not? And maybe that's a good proxy, maybe not, but they're still being paid, so there could be ulterior motives to the response. So we have to keep that in mind. But interaction can still be measured. So when given a goal, which link does the Turker click first? If they're asked to sign up, what's their progression within the site that they actually take to reach that particular goal that you define here? So let's go through my example test was like, given 2 large images on the home page, under which image are the Turkers more successful in reaching the event page? And so I kind of have some built-in assumptions with this particular test here. I'm going to say the image where the Turkers reached that event page is the image that was more compelling, that led them to actually want to interact. Because that's the image that not only allowed that Turker to say, yes, I'm going to accept that particular hit, but actually was compelling enough where they were going to hunt around and reach that particular end goal that I've defined. And so they have a lot of options there. They have a lot of times they can abort, right? When they first see the particular hit, they're going to see my web page just loaded there, and they don't, and that counts as a page impression. You know, Vanity is looking at that as an impression, and a lot of times, as you'll see in the results here, a lot of times they just skip by. So it's fairly open-ended as to why that is. Maybe it's the image, maybe it's not, but we're just trying to generate some hypotheses here, not necessarily reach any conclusions, but within this particular task, I had option A, which is this really cool guy, I think, that's overly saturated, now that I know, that's crowd surfing, and he's holding his hands in the air, and it's like, oh my gosh, he's obviously a really cool fan, right? Wow, I can't wait to go to 5 Ask 5. It's probably what he's thinking. He goes, gosh, I can't wait to get home. And so, you can see the directions on the right that prompt for feedback. And then option B, these are just a couple girls waiting outside a concert. They're out obviously having a great time. They are also probably thinking about 5 Ask 5 and how they can meet the band that they're there for. I mean, very exciting, right? So here's the interesting thing. So the Turker instructions are, look through my site, find a way to the band's event page, then give feedback below what you don't like about my site, and tell them to submit. And the instructions are fairly open-ended, and that kind of implies that there's multiple ways to get to the event page. And since we don't have intent, or a user that's really interested in this product, we'll just give them an open-ended objective and see how they interact with the site, and see how they go about achieving this open-ended goal that I've defined. The other thing is that the Turker doesn't really know that we're measuring which image, right? That's our underlying test. But we're just giving them a very open-ended goal for which they're to achieve. And when they achieve that goal, then we're going to go ahead and infer a few things from this underlying test that we've set up. So we have something very specific that we're testing. The Turker doesn't know that. Turker just has a very open-ended goal. So I'll show you the results. And they're rather boring because it ends up being inconclusive. You have option A, the crowd surfer guy, actually converted a little bit better, but it's really not statistically significant. And so this kind of saddened me because I would like A direction, not B direction, but A direction. And so I will have to formulate more tests and such. But you can see it'll show like the number of participants. Obviously the number of participants total are much higher than those who actually participated. And those are Turkers that just actually looked at that particular task, but didn't choose to accept it. But you can still use that as a data point, right? They elected not to even participate in your task. And so, was it the image? You know, it's the most prominent thing on the page. Could be copy text. I mean, there's a lot of hypotheses still to explore, but it's there. Lastly, we're going to talk about dealing with spam data. Okay. And Mechanical Turk has definitely gotten a bad rap about this in the past few years in terms of a lot of garbage that flows through the system. It's as high as 40% on all submissions. I actually think that's lower. They got a new CTO, I believe she is, and I don't remember what her title is, but she seems to be adding a lot more features, and they seem to be getting better reputation systems and such. So there's a few more things in place now to mitigate against this, but it's still definitely a problem. And so what you have is, you have a lot of people that have just set up bots who will arbitrarily accept tasks, they'll look for form fields, they'll input junk data, and they're hoping that you're just passively approving the task. And so programmatically just passively approving it. So they're hoping to just collect on some of those. And so it really is a problem. You're going to encounter it, probably in your first pass of things. But there's a few ways you can fight against it. So kind of the first naive solution is just a gold standard question, kind of CAPTCHA, where you have, I like to say like 4 plus 5 or something. I will tend to expand the English words. and maybe even remove a letter or something like that. So yeah, 4 plus 5, and that sometimes is good enough. But there's actually a better way that you can do, this that will improve the quality of your feedback as well. So you ask them a validating question, your gold standard question, but that particular validating gold standard question is actually based on the very feedback that they entered. And so what this does is not only validates whether they're human or not, but then they actually have to go back and reread what they've entered. And so they end up checking their work, and I don't remember the exact paper, but when they surveyed afterwards, the Turkers said, yeah, I actually ended up rewriting a lot of things that I didn't like. So it tends to improve the quality. So you get a double bonus there. So I have, as you can see, along with the feedback form on the Turkey study, I've actually instituted a gold question form field as well. And I do that check for you. So that's baked right in. I haven't released it as a gem, but it's part of the master, it's merged into master now. So if you check out the Turkey master branch, you can definitely start to utilize that. And so hopefully that'll get you some better responses. So that kind of covers the usability testing portion. I kind of like to give some more general research regarding Mechanical Turk, some findings that you may find surprising and such, and then we'll probably open it up for some questions, Q&A. So the point of this study was they showed that increasing compensation does not necessarily increase accuracy. So if your particular hit study requires some sort of data gathering or something, bumping up that particular number, the compensation number, might not necessarily give you a better, more accurate result. And if I recall from this study, it ended up being to get better, more accurate results, it just ended up, they had institute redundancy. So they did triple check, quadruple checks, and such, looking for the commonalities between it. But they found there's definitely a sweet spot, and just by, you're not necessarily going to get more accurate results just by arbitrarily increasing the amount you're paying these workers. This particular study showed that most of their tasks were completed between 6 a.m. GMT and 3 p.m. GMT, which actually translates to between 2 a.m. and 11 a.m. in the United States and 11:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. in India. And those are the two countries that provide most of the work for Mechanical Turk. And since these attended, their particular task was tagging images, and for some reason, for whatever reason, it seemed to be that it was workers in India that liked that particular task more often. And here's a really, really important point here that applies to all Mechanical Turk hits, that when you're posting your hits, Turkers tend to work the queue sorted by the default, which is the number of hits you have posted. And so if you have very large tasks, you can actually exploit that. In fact, I know of companies who will arbitrarily inflate their number of hits that they have posted to the service later on pull some of those back, and actually just to have their hit numbers inflated so that Turkers are more apt to see their particular task posted on the service and such. And so that's really important. If you can get that number higher, then you have a better chance of being visible without having to increase the compensation. So that's really important. And then lastly, I just want to leave you some other creative uses so that you can kind of start to see that Mechanical Turk isn't just a survey platform, it's just not a scientific gathering platform, that these are actual humans. And I think people are just starting to touch the surface as far as like content creation and such. And especially when you're writing new applications, this is definitely a service that you can start to use. You can be very resourceful. You can start to envision with external forms, you can start to envision having Turkers record user videos, right? Like Framebase.io was a service that was recently launched, Hacker News, and you could have them on an external forum start capturing video. You can do content creation. If anyone wants to talk about content creation afterwards, we can talk about iterative content building, where you have Turkers like submit first sentence, and then you have Turkers build off that sentence, and you have another set of Turkers build off that sentence, start forming these very long paragraphs. Some of the creative projects, you can check this out on my GitHub page. I call it ad vote. And so if you have an AdWords campaign and you would like to test that, say like you're doing, this example is grass-fed beef. You can envision something like mortgage refinance where you're talking like $50 per click. What it does is allows you to upload your ads, all your variations. It's going to download your competitors for that particular set of keywords. It's going to download the organic results. It's going to mix them all into a Google-like search page result, and it asks the Turkers, which would you be more likely to click on if you were searching for, say, grass-fed beef? And so it kind of provides a Google AdWords simulation without having to pay Google AdWords price tags. So, we've got 10,000 sheep. This is really cool. As far as this particular artist had a Flash-based application that allowed Turkers to draw a picture of a sheep, and he would record it as they're drawn, and you can go ahead and visit the site, and it'll show all of these different sheep that are drawn, and it just shows in the exact same manner that the Turker developed it. Quite cool. Dr. Seussify the news. And so there was just a research group that wanted to see how creative Turkers would actually get, and so they were having the Turkers rewrite headlines. So I like the last one. It says, the headline was, BP tries to cap the well, protest set to start. And so Turker writes, BP tries to cap with the hat while protesters start to raise hell about the well. So, but that's it. Open it up to some questions and such. Okay. Thanks everyone for coming out.